fragen, was ist.
Was ist es? Aber kein Arschtritt.
Ja, David sagt doch was zum Ding, was du geschenkt bekommen hast.
So. Tschüss. Scheiße! Digga, das gibt's doch nicht!
Ich hab einfach gekillt.
Nee, hast du nicht. Ich hab mich selbst gekillt, ich Vollidiot.
Nein, ich hab mich auch gekillt.
Da oben ist er. Hört ihn doch! Elias, du bist sehr schlecht. Egal, komm, ich spiele wieder normal mit euch. Das macht jetzt ja gar keinen Spaß mit euch. Drop ihn doch.
David. Da wollen einfach zu. Dass dann rauskommt und dann stecken bleibt. Oh, jetzt hat er dich. Er kommt. Es war nicht schneller, aber er kommt. Elias hinter dir. Ein Hit.
Nein, Elias, dein Ernst, Mann.
Ich bin jetzt auch mit richtigen. Ich bin jetzt auch wieder mit richtigen Waffen.
Nicht schlecht, David. Schon lustig.
Ich spiele jetzt weiter mit richtigen Waffen mit, oder? Schon besser.
Lass uns nachher mal machen. Also, Spiele wie so ein Team.
Weißt du, ich will wissen, wie man das mit dem Niederstrecken kann. Das war böse jetzt. Ich habe mich gerade diesen fetten Hit gedrückt. Warte mal. Ja?
Ja, ich bin's, Alex.
Servus, Alex. Ich bin zu Hause, ja. Alles klar. Bis gleich. Ciao.
Wer ist das jetzt? Nur noch der Ding oder was?
Geburtstag fett essen heute Abend. David?
Doch, Digga.
Und ich habe gar nichts gemacht. Was ist da los? Was ist mit dir? Was?
Das war mein
Ja, aber Digga, ey. Ich hab den Anrang im Moment abgeschlossen.
Ich hab's am Liga gar nicht. Ich hätte relativ abgewehrt, stimmt.
Ich glaube. Ich bin Weg gedrückt. Ich gehe auf David, meld mich, wenn du los bist. Start.
Ja. kann dir Geld geben. Oder?
Als Digga.
Ja.
Aber du hast keine Kippen. Also auch reicht es für die anderen.
Also dann gehst du nachher mit Zigaretten und fertig. Ich weiß nicht gut. Delikate Situation. Scheiße.
Stopp Rammstein, Digga.
Digga, was ist das, was so...
Wo ist eigentlich der...
Was kochen wir eigentlich heute?
Ja, Jungs, wir haben jetzt schon 170 drin. Wo haben wir das schon mit dem Geld rausgenommen? Du hast schon letztens 80 Euro rein.
Ja, aber ich habe nichts drauf, ich habe nur 20.
Das sind nur 20 Punkte.
Wir haben 85 minus 60.
60 sind wir bei 15.
David.
15
Du hast 15 Euro. David hat 50 Euro reingemacht. Sind wir bei 111, 116, doch 116 Euro. Ja. 116 Euro. Elias hat 2,50 genommen. Dann hast du nochmal 20 genommen. So. Das muss ich noch irgendwo notiert haben. Aber nicht, dass wir das nicht notiert haben. Das kann nicht sein, dass es nur 20, also gerade eben, das kann aber auch meine 100 Euro, wo die weg sind, so 70 Euro sind in Arbeit. Das? Das heißt, das sind nicht die 30, aber das sind die 30. Das zahlen, dann musst du nochmal 10 Euro rausholen. Ja. Doch. 30. Dann wieder die 100 dazu. Dann sind wir bei 186.
Gutschein,
Pierre. 100 Euro. Digga, was ist das, Mann? Pierre, 100 Euro. Minus 30. 70. So, Digga, wir könnten Stromrechnung fahren, das wäre schon mal das erste. Fertig.
Bei 5 Minuten schon wieder da, okay?
Wer ist jetzt eigentlich alles noch da, Digga?
Wolltest du peinlich wie möglich gehen? Huh? Keine Ahnung.
I've not actually posted it, so I will get that posted in just a moment. Is that true? Yeah, there is a thing. The synchronicities are abound. Why was it important for her to email agency, potentially the NSA, definitely the FBI, and there are 17 intel agencies, and we don't even list every one of those ever. What are the duties of the DOJ? I think you guys know those. We all need to beat that one. When does military intelligence have jurisdiction? You guys can look that up and tell me what you find. But this is also vested powers POTUS have regarding military intelligence versus the ABC agencies in matters of national security of the Commonwealth. Does the Attorney General oversee the firing of FBI and DOJ officials? So, etc., etc. This goes on and on. I don't need to read the whole thing. Again, there have been multiple posts where we've been told what the plan is. We've been told how the plan is going to be executed. We've been told to be patient, and we've been told why certain moves and counter moves and approaches need to be taken by the Q team the military operation. And we're soldiers, but we're not used to real war. We're not like the British next generation, unfortunately. But we're giving our chance at this next
London, wo wir?
1914 and
Gönneme.
1914. World War II was fought between 19...
Okay, we go to Polar Peak.
What the shift hard there is though?
Right. So,
What?
when you ever hear the expression, you may
The shift hard there is though.
Chinese, Germany.
You're a really big fish, yeah? Yeah.
welcome to the U.S. military, but we, in First World War, had to execute the plans.
I come from Albania. Oh, that's it.
And know that,
Don't stick
storm,
charop.
Oh, nice.
and they were all like, why are all these military people here? And then
Oh, shift charop. Who is that? Oh, funny.
Why you speak so bad words?
knowingly says,
Oh my god. You all noobs. I'm too a noob. You have not a plan what you speak. Jungs. Guys.
Yeah, Patriots. Okay. So, you will information. Yeah, come. Okay, for you I speak information.
Halt die Schnauze, Schwuchtel!
Shoot die Pitchko.
So, what is Fractal and what is to now the planning?
We look to here. The Black Railroad case.
Ooh, the Black Railroad. 12 May 1970, 2018.
Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Review, recent statements by the United States Navy allude to new UFO reporting guidelines being implemented. Based on reports by military pilots in recent years, unidentified aircraft are causing security concern. 66 years, and I'll explore Air Force regulations already on the books that outline the very same thing. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey, my quest for the truth. My name is John Greenwald, and I have hammered the United States. Declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper. And no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenwald Jr. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I hope you listened to the last episode with David Aguilar. Wow, was that an amazing conversation for me to have. I will totally be honest with you right now. I'm kind of geeked out about that whole thing. So if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to it, definitely do so. That's episode number 30. It was my one-on-one with world-renowned astronomer, scientist, David Aguilar. And it was the headline from Police, of course, but I did so with... Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, recent statements by the United States Navy. Unidentified aircraft are causing security concern and aviation hazards that need to be addressed. Join me as I connect the phrasing used by the Navy going back 66. And I'll explore Air Force regulations already on the books that outline this very. What does this all mean? That's coming up on the Black Vault Radio. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey, my quest for the truth. My name is John Greenwald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests, trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All important is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenwald Jr. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I hope you listened to the last episode with David Aguilar. Wow, was that an amazing conversation for me to have. I will totally be honest with you right now. I kind of geeked out about that whole thing. So if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to it, definitely do so. That's episode number 30. It was my one-on-one with world-renowned astronomer, scientist, David Aguilar, and it was an amazing conversation. So make sure you tune into that. If this is your first time tuning into the Black Vault Radio, welcome. If you are not aware, I have a show notes page which breaks down everything that I talk about, not only on this program, but all others, including links to where you can listen to all other programs. That's located at theblackvault.com/show notes. Now, if you did listen to episode number 30 with David Aguilar, I made reference in the very beginning that I started recording the introduction to that show. And really, last week with the Navy protocols or guidelines for UFOs, I thought, you know what, out of respect for everyone's time, let's just go ahead and separate that news and those updates, because I have a really cool update for you all. Sorry to kind of tease you with it and say that the episode is going to drop the same day. It ended up not doing so, and here we are a couple days after, through the weekend and on a Monday. I do apologize for that. I have a 6-month-old baby and a 5-year-old toddler, and wow, nothing ever goes as planned. So Friday, daddy duty kind of took over a little bit earlier than expected. So not to make excuses for you, but my family does come first, for obvious reasons, of course. But I did want to get this show out to you and update you all, because even as of today, no media outlets are really reporting it, even in some of the other articles that I've seen pop up. And it is a very important update to the story of the Navy guidelines for UFOs. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, last week was some pretty cool music came around. This is all about the headline from Politico that dropped on the evening of April 23rd. Now, about 6 o'clock Eastern Time, a headline was dropped on the Politico that read, U.S. Navy drafting new guidelines for reporting UFOs. The subheading reads, the Surface Secretary also provided a series of briefings by senior naval intelligence officials as well as aviators who reported hazards to aviation safety. And then the article starts. Now, this was written by Mr. Brian Bender. If you don't know who that is, he's an investigative journalist who was responsible for the Politico story on To the Stars Academy, but more so about the ATIP program that broke in December of 2017. Now, we all know that the New York Times really is the one that's credited for the kind of the first and most important article. Now, I don't rank them in levels of importance personally, but again, that's really the one that was most well-known. But Politico deserves a lot of credit because they came out with one the exact same day. And Mr. Brian Bender was the author of that. Now, fast forward to April 23rd of this year, of 2019, he drops another story, exclusive.
And it is true. The gematria has an interesting twist to it from an interpretation perspective.
What was all about these Navy guidelines? Obviously, this is exciting and encouraging news because for quite a few years, in the tune of about 20 years, I have lectured and spoken quite openly about how the government and military aspects, some of them declassified, truly support that there is a threat to national security behind this UFO phenomena. Yes, the plural isn't intended on that. There's a threat there that they seemingly have not taken seriously. Now, I've talked a lot about this program. I've talked a lot about this on this program, and I've gone into some Air Force manuals and so on and so forth about UFOs. But after I put the spotlight on what seemingly had just been covered up and disappeared, if you're not familiar with that story, that's Air Force Manual, Air Force Instruction 10-206. I'll link it in the show notes page so you can see that story. I'm not going to tell it again here. But I obviously want to the point that this is something that's very important to me, and I feel should be very important to society, where we should take this seriously. So reading this headline, I was really intrigued. Let me read the first line to you here. The U.S. Navy is drafting new guidelines for naval and other personnel to report encounters with, quote, unidentified aircraft, unquote. A significant new step in creating a formal process to collect and analyze the unexplained sightings and destigmatize them. That was the first line of the Politico story by Mr. Brian Bender. Now, it kind of piqued my interest a little bit. The headline said one thing, the first paragraph said another. Now, before you tune out and think I'm just going to debunk this whole thing, stay tuned because that's not what I'm about to do. What I do, and let me preface this her show and say this. For those who have not only read my book, but seen me do lectures and so on, the way that I approach investigations and research something is you can't always believe the first thing that you hear. You always have to challenge it. You always have to push back and look for corroborating evidence. That's always not that we need to do. And it is something that we, as researchers and investigators, we have to challenge what we are told in a press statement or at a press conference, especially by the government and the military, but we have to challenge it. Because true research, you don't go in it with your mind already made up. You have to go in and start challenging and throwing things at the idea to see what sticks or what bounces back or what red flags arise. We do this for multiple reasons. Because when you start scratching off the list all of the potential explanations, skeptics can try and fire back at you. And I've done this quite a few times through different areas of research, UFOs being only one of them. But you take something that you might read, see, or hear, and challenge it. And when I was 15 years old, that's exactly what I did when I approached the UFO topic. I was told
I'm 20 years
by the
old.
U.S. government, so I challenged it. And I went after evidence, and I got an overwhelming amount of it to disprove what the government was saying. And that's not true only with the government. What I mean by all of this is you have to challenge everything. You have to make sure that everything, what you're hearing and reading is correct. So I decided to challenge the headline. Because will U.S. Navy drafting new guidelines for reporting UFOs coincide with the actual statement by the U.S. Navy referring to unidentified aircraft? Now, I know that sounds like semantics and who cares, it's all the same. It actually is an important note because we want to make sure that things are not embellished. Now again, don't tune out thinking I'm just going to debunk any or try to debunk something. Quite the contrary, there's quite a bit of research here. So let's dig in. So I read this article, and traveling together from Politico, because I don't think they did 100% of the statement. But regardless, Washington Post also had published a statement from the U.S. Navy. And what they do in articles of is they take the statement, they generally just don't run it from top to bottom. Sometimes statements are a paragraph, sometimes they're a full page with 6 paragraphs. But here's the statement that I'll read in full. Now this is as of the dropping of the Political story, so that would be April 23rd. And then Washington Post, around the same time frame, I believe it was the next day, April 24. This is the full statement. There have been a number of reports of unauthorized and/or unidentified aircraft entering various military-controlled ranges and designated airspace in recent years. For safety and security concerns, the Navy and the United States Air Force takes these reports very seriously and investigates each and every report. As part of this effort, the Navy is updating and formalizing the process by which reports of any such suspected incursions can be made to the cognizant authorities. A new message to the fleet that will detail the steps for reporting is in order. In response to requests for information from congressional members and staff, Navy officials have provided a series of briefings by senior naval intelligence officials, as well as aviators who reported hazards to aviation safety. That is the entire statement. How can we kind of break this down a little bit? We want to make sure that the headline is exactly what we want it to be. UFOs, the phenomena that we know is there, that people are seeing, both inside the military and out, that is truly what they mean. Or is this just more of a common sense thing? Of course, if you see an unidentified aircraft encroaching onto a military base, you will want to have procedures and guidelines to report it. Case in point, I received some declassified documents from the NCIS, or the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and they researched what we would call, UFO, something that was flying or we couldn't identify, encroachments on bases that mostly turned out to be drones. There were really nothing of note. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But my whole point is that the Navy actually has taken these seriously for quite some time.
And even though they're very mundane explanations and nothing of worthy to spend a lot of time on, regardless, they have taken it seriously. So there's a couple ways to kind of approach this. Is it truly the phenomenon that they are interested in, the phenomena that we all know is UFO, or is this just more of the common sense, like, hey, if you're flying an F-18 and you're on some mission and you see something that no one knows what it is, say something about it. Don't hide it. So I wanted to kind of look back a little bit at history and figure out exactly what this is all about. So I created a really big, kind of turned out to a really big article getting into that phrase of unidentified aircraft and how it connects to the UFO phenomenon. And this will all positive note, so please, don't think that I'm just trying to dismiss this entire story. On the contrary, I think these connections are fairly historically interesting and historically important. Now, the first thing I want to bring up, here I am saying I'm not going to, be a skeptic about this whole thing, is the Condon report. Now, obviously, even by me, this is a highly criticized report, as they investigated UFOs and wanted to dissect what Project Blue Book at the time had collected. Now, this was a group of scientists and officials that got together at the University of Colorado. This was in 1966 when they convened, and it lasted until 68. They analyzed all of the UFO information that had come in, and they concluded a few things. Number one, that the UFO phenomenon really wasn't real. The UFO phenomenon didn't pose a threat to national security, and that the UFO phenomenon did not warrant further scientific investigation. And so that was the overall nutshell conclusion of what that report was all about. But here's something that's very interesting on why I bring it up, because their conclusion is something I highly disagree with. So let me just put that up front. It's kind of a farce, and it deserves the criticism that it gets. However, on page 125, it specifically connects the flying saucers, is how they refer to it, with what they call unidentified aircraft. Now, what is the point here? This shows that the United States military and the verbiage at the time where we know they had a UFO project, a UFO research project, that we now know as Project Blue Book, they connected the phrase of unidentified aircraft to the flying saucer phenomena. And it's in the same line, and I put screenshots on the article and so on, so you can see it. But it was an encouraging find, again, just getting into the terminology. Because going back to what I was saying earlier about how I approach research, not only do you want to challenge everything you hear, you also want to take into consideration what might be said by somebody to discredit what you are saying or what others are saying. In other words, you want to meet the skeptical response head on before it ever happens. It's something I've done since day one. Obviously now in the recent year and a half, 2 years, I'm a little bit criticized for it because I do ask questions and I do challenge, let's say, like To the Stars Academy or the stories about ATIP. But that's research, because if the truth is there, this is attributed to all topics. If you're researching something and the truth is there, challenging it will do nothing. If you try and discredit, that's something else. But if you challenge it and you ask important questions, when the answers come, if your hypothesis is still true, well, those answers will do nothing but help. That's what the truth is all about. And so that's how I approach many of these topics. This specific one is no different. So that Condon report reference I thought was fairly interesting. But of course, those that know me, one document, one reference, one piece of evidence is never enough. So I started digging a little bit more and went into some historical documents from the CIA. Now, why this is important is we've now established a connection between that phrase and flying saucers. But in 1953, a CIA document, there's quite a few others, but in the one I'll point out is from 1953, was detailing UFOs that were seen over Spain, Greece, and Italy. Now, the intelligence report all went into flying saucers and various UFO encounters and this and that in those areas I mentioned. But in the intelligence report, what do you think the phrasing was and the subject that the CIA or the intelligence community chose. Unidentified aircraft. Not flying saucers or UFOs. Unidentified aircraft. Now, the content of the intelligence report, again, was on flying saucers, but the intelligence community put the subject at the top of the report, unidentified aircraft. The heading for the intelligence read, unidentified aircraft reported over Spain, Greece, North Africa. So again, it now shows a link between that phrasing and the intelligence community. So not only the military was using it, those are two different things. So that additional link was something that's, very, very important to establish. But we're talking about documents that stretch back 66 years. So the question in my mind was, historically that is significant, but if unidentified aircraft really now is the phrase of the day, because there's been a lot of debate on whether they call UFOs,
USOs, or that reference codes. And you can see that's what it brings them up, or the way that they've been related on the in QMAP. And the other interesting part is the navigation numbers here. Right now there aren't that many because there's only 116 players. So they, if you go to page 5, it's the most current ones. The eldest ones, and then of course if you go back to page 1 and you can navigate one page at a time.
Whatever the phenomena is going to be referred to as, whatever acronym they decide to choose, I think that is a very silly debate, but it is a debate right now nonetheless. So I thought, great, now that we've established a historical link between unidentified aircraft and flying saucers, or UFOs, the way you and I want it to be, let's figure out what else is there. And hone in on that phrase, unidentified aircraft, that's the phrase of the day. There is something to be said that if you don't say UFO, and under the FOIA you request UFO information, well, if the same exact documents just phrased differently, so unidentified aircraft, sometimes, depending upon how you word your request, that information will not be responsive, and it will not be sent to you, so you'll be missing out. So I started digging in a little bit, and I started making some really interesting connections between that phrase and what's on the book. Now, the United States Air Force was highly criticized by some took to the blogs, some took to social media, some went to article comments, that the Air Force was essentially behind. Why would they ignore the UFO phenomenon? And the Navy is leading the way. So they received a little bit of heat behind all of this, but actually it probably isn't warranted. So let me just give you a couple documents that I found that are already in the document, but also about you or not, because this was kind of a new angle for me to approach the topic. The first thing I came across was the 45th Space Wing instruction, known as 13-201. Now, a lot of these documents I'm talking about are all about aviation safety. So it's the safety of the men and women that fly in the sky for the military, making sure that they are safe. And there are multiple ways to approach that safety, but this particular manual, anyway, it provides guidance and procedures for the safe operation of all airspace operations. So again, it's punching that aircraft safety very much like the Navy did in the Washington Post, and now quite a few places have talked about it. But in this manual, one of the things under the supporting aircraft / air crew operations section talked about what to look for. Aircraft with an ER assigned airspace to Cape Control. Now, ER is Eastern Range. So the 45th Space Wing is located in Florida at Patrick Air Force Base. So also kind of an interesting connection there, being, a space wing and all. But that being said, this particular manual only did apply to what they call the Eastern Range, or that general vicinity in Florida around Patrick Air Force Base. But it is important nonetheless, because it shows that in 2014, and this manual is still on the books. It has not been rescinded. But the Air Force has been taking this seriously. And the exact same verbiage that the Navy had already mentioned it in Politico, for the exact same reasons that the Navy mentioned. So again, I go back to that criticism of the Air Force. It may not be warranted. But as I mentioned before, one piece of evidence doesn't work for me. It's not going to work for me. I came across Aviation Safety Programs, Air Force Instruction 91-225. Now, in this particular document, this was all about Air Force Aviation Safety Programs, what they refer to as ASP. Again, punching that safety thing. Now, there's something that's outlined in this document called the Line Operations Safety Audit, or LOSA. Now, this is referred to in the manual. Let me read below. The LOSA process involves the collection of unidentified observations and the development of a consolidated report of trends and conclusions regarding day-to-day operations. Now, it doesn't say unidentified aircraft, but what it does is kind of gives a different spin. Again, it's all about the phrasing. So if there is truth to quote-unquote them, the powers that be, are changing the verbiage, well, we can't just lock ourselves into quote-unquote unidentified aircraft. So now this particular document, 2015, also still on the books, actually applies to the Air Force as a whole, not just a certain region. And they're talking about unidentified observations. But what's also key about this is that they're consolidating all of those observations into a report looking for trends. That's how I read that. I'll let you decide on what exactly that means. But the question is, does that mean that they have created a database of unidentified observations that United States Air Force pilots cannot identify? Now, I'll read the next line. This report may identify hazard or trends warranting further investigation. Now, that's pretty interesting that the United States Air Force has this on the books, agency-wide. Now, of course, this is something that I call FOIA fodder, and you better put money down that I'm going after documents related to this, because this was a new find on my part. I'd not really seen it before at all. But connecting it historically again to that phrasing, and if that's how the Navy is approaching it, the Air Force is probably the same. So that is definitely a worthy document to note. Going back a little bit farther from 2015 when that manual was, I want to talk to you about 2007. Now this was, let me see, March of 2007. There was a press release by Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. Now the reason why this is important is this actually goes back to the unidentified aircraft phrasing. And there was an operation that was underway. It was a training operation in Alaska. And by the way, Elmendorf is part of the NORAD installation. So again, that agency that looks at space. That's an interesting thing. Of this operation was training on how to intercept unidentified aircraft. They actually put an official definition in the press release on what unidentified aircraft meant. So let me read that to you. An unidentified aircraft approaching American or Canadian airspace that is not on an international flight plan or has, without air traffic control authorization, deviated from its original flight plan. Any aircraft considered unidentified is investigated. And that's an important line there, because this is from an Air Force base talking about unidentified aircraft. Now, I don't care how you refer to it as, it's all kind of the same thing. But there's an incredibly important links to this entire story of unidentified aircraft and unidentified observations, especially when military exercises are underway to intercept said unidentified aircraft. Does it mean that there are Russian fighters or spy planes that are operating off the coast of Alaska? Probably. But what else, quite possibly, are they training for? And that therein lies the question here of what we are talking about. Is this just a response to Russian aggression, or to the North Koreans not playing nice in the sandbox all the time, or whatever, or is this code for something else entirely? Now, as a researcher, I can't rule out any of that. It all could be true. It could be a coincidence. Who knows? But regardless, that's why these pieces of information are important. Now, one of the other things that I've done is the commercial side, not just the military side. These are interesting coincidences, which I thought was kind of fun, but, just more so in a geeky way for myself. But this goes back to 2005 and the FAA. Now, obviously, the FAA is instrumental in aviation safety. We already talked about military, the safety there. But I thought, well, what about the FAA? Maybe they have similar verbiage. They have talked about UFOs in some of their manuals. I don't know how much I talked about it on this show, but I've done lectures and stuff. I've talked quite a bit. I've got some pages on the Black Vault where you can see they're not afraid to use the phrase UFOs, but they also push you towards the private sector. The National UFO Reporting Center is specifically but also Bigelow Aerospace at the time. And that's an interesting story in itself. But Bass was able to get their name, Bigelow Aerospace, into some FAA manuals where it had since disappeared. Project Google, for that one maybe a coincidence, of course. ATIP, forgive me. But that all may be a coincidence. But that, again, that's a different story. So the FAA is not afraid to use UFOs. They're unidentified aircraft policies and stuff like that. And this is where the interesting connection came in. In 2005, there was an incident where a UFO, it was kind of short-lived as a UFO. It ended up being a small commercial plane that was piloted where the pilot was not responding to air traffic control. But he veered off course and he encroached on the airspace of the right. The time of detection / a UFO. And, jets were scrambled. The White House took evasive action inside the White House to make sure everybody, all the key players were safe. Safe to say that there's not safe things on underground bunkers that they could probably risk them away to, including stuff that we're not familiar with. So this had actually worked its way into one of the very first television documentaries that I had produced for the History Channel. It's called UFOs in the White House. Now, that's kind of the fun coincidence here, because when I came across this, I had no idea that, here we are 14 years later, and I would be writing about that very incident, including the FAA's use of unidentified aircraft. The deputy administrator by the name of Robert Sturgill had, and I hope that I have that pronounced correctly, he held a press conference about this very incident at the White House. Unidentified aircraft and how it approached restricted airspace. He said in his press statement that he wanted to make sure that it, quote, was managed efficiently, effectively, and most importantly, safely, of course, punching that safety, that safety angle to all of this. I'm going to jump around with quotes, but these are specific quotes from his press statement.
40er Hit.
Unidentified aircraft operating in airspace are taken very seriously. In the event of a threat from an unidentified aircraft, coordinated action can be taken to appropriately address the threat and keep the region safe. FAA did not know who the aircraft was. They were referring to the 2005 encroachment on the White House airspace. FAA did not know who the aircraft was. At this point, the aircraft was considered to be a track of interest, or what they called a TOI. Now, I haven't really heard of a track of interest before, but it really showed in 2005. Based on a UFO, even though it was identified eventually and quickly, but based on a UFO, the FAA created this press statement, started defining unidentified aircraft, saying that it was being taken very seriously at this point, acknowledged that it was encroaching on restricted airspace in multiple cases, namely this specific one was the White House, and that they probably tracks of interest. In the Federal Aviation Regulations, or FAR, this is also Aeronautical Information Manual. This is the 2019 version, and it talks about unidentified aircraft, the same thing that deputy administrator is talking about. And they talk and also diagram intercept procedures for unidentified aircraft. Now again, all of this seems like common sense in today's day and age. Aggressive countries that don't people using drones, hobbyists and enthusiasts, the commercial sector getting into drone delivery programs, helicopters in your house to drop off a box. All of that is in the future for us, both present and in the future. So is this common sense in the way that they are now approaching aviation safety, or is there something else? And I go back to those links of those 66 years connecting the phrasing of unidentified aircraft to flying saucers and the UFO phenomenon that you and I all love and enjoy so much. So I don't put a conclusion here on if the headline is accurate. I just don't understand it. And my reading site came up with all of these different documents that in my mind does actually show between that phrasing, the careful phrasing, and UFOs and flying saucers going back decades and decades and decades. To me, that's an important link. And all of that evidence goes to more support what is going on here. Now, here's the update on what happened since that Politico story dropped. Now, I went after a statement from the U.S. Navy addressing what had been reported. I wanted to know, is the Navy looking at this saying, yep, that's exactly what we're doing? Or are they looking at it going, this is an over-embellished story, and we're taking unidentified aircraft seriously, but this is nothing more because we've had an influx of drones or whatever around our installations. I just wanted to know, was there any type of statement? More so, though, I wanted to make sure that the full statement is out in the open. Because again, going back to what I said earlier, media doesn't always publish the full statement, and that's not a bash on them. That's just reality. I mean, a lot of times statements are fairly boring. So journalists need to kind of keep everything entertaining and then get moving along a little bit in their story, so they'll pull bits and pieces of it. So that was the night. I left them a message the night the Politico story dropped. Now fast forward until Friday morning on the 26th. I had not received any acknowledgement or any update whatsoever. And so I thought, okay, well maybe they're just not going to respond, and that's okay. You don't always get what you're looking for, so that's fine. And I received a response. Now this is from the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare. And that is the spokesperson, the office where the spokesperson who is being credited for the statement that was published by Politico, and then the one I got, Joseph Gradisher. Okay, so that he's going to be credited. For those who are looking at the link and you wonder why I'm blurring the contact information and the name of the person that sent me this, it's a courtesy. I just don't do traffic that my site gets. I just don't like putting people's, unless it's public, I just don't like putting direct contact information so they just don't get inundated. If there's other journalists out there that have their own connections and they write CHINFO, which is the acronym for this particular Navy office, that's fine. There's nothing, I'm not hiding anything here. It's just as a courtesy. So that explains the blurs. But regardless, the person that they asked me to credit the statement to was Joseph Gradisher, spokesperson for Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare. Now, in the letter that you can see, this person said, here is the updated statement on this, meaning the UFO Navy guidelines. And I thought, okay, well, updated. Well, it's only been 2 days. Like, what are they updating here? 2 or 3 days. So what's going on? And so I started going line by line from what I had cobbled together between Politico and Washington Post, and then what this updated statement was. And there was only one line that was different. And it was the line that reads, and this is the first one that went out, a new message to the fleet that will detail the steps for reporting is in draft. And I haven't talked about this yet, but that was a key line there. Because a draft document just means that, draft. It doesn't mean anything is implemented, it doesn't mean anything is sent out to the Navy, it doesn't mean anything is on the books. It just means they're kicking around an idea it's in draft form. Not to get too technical, another interesting point about drafts is generally, not 100% of the time, but generally draft documents are exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. It's exempted due to what they call B5. So it's in essence, it's a draft document, so it's not official yet. And they're still talking about how it should read on a final draft and then obviously get implemented. So all of those kind of banters back and forth between the powers that be, and then deciding, making decisions, changing things, all of that is generally exempted by what they call exemption B5. So draft documents are generally exempt. Yet the line changed. This was the only line that changed, and it said, a message to the fleet details the steps for reporting each incident. No draft language. Not future tense, but present tense. That they actually set this out. That means that the UFO guidelines, whatever they are now in its final form. In the 2-3 days since that political article was dropped, about 2.5 to be technical, the political article was dropped, and in fairness was very accurate. They were saying that they were draft. Not many people picked up on that, at least I don't think. I didn't see a whole lot of people talking about it. They have procedures. Well, not really, as of that day. Now it's safe to say, yes, they probably do. Now, is it the UFO phenomena that we want? I hope so. I put out the historical link. I mean, it's all for you to decide, but, that is very, very encouraging. But the fact that they went out of their way to tell me it's an updated statement and they took the draft language out, that means one of two things. One, the first statement was erroneous and wrong, so they updated it. Credit to them for being accurate. Or in the 2.5 days that Politico dropped that story to when they sent me the updated statement, they finished the draft and sent it out to the fleet. So that brings me to the message itself. Of course, we all want to see that because we want to see what the language is. Does it coincide with the press statement? Does it say UFOs? Does it say phenomena? What does it say? So I wrote this person back from the interview and specifically asked for the message. Again, in the interest of accuracy for talking about this, and not only on this program, but I've done a couple of interviews since Friday, making sure that I have the story right. And they said that they are withholding it. I'm going to go ahead and read the exact response. It says, we are unable to share the message with you due to the operational and aircraft-specific nature of these guidelines. Security considerations preclude their disclosure. Now that's the quote. That was the response I get. They, of course, said thank you, and that was it. So, of course, I don't have the message to give you. Bummer. But at least we know now that the message exists. And if there's any question about them taking the draft of language out, that they won't, address that, we can now confirm and solidify there is a message. Because indirectly they said, we just can't share that message with you. If the message was still in draft, they may say, well, the message is still being worked on. If there was no message, and I was reading into this, they would say there's no message to give you. And yet, they say we are unable to share the message with you. And they give you the reason why. Of the message. Now, no news media agency is reporting this yet. They're still talking about all this being draft. So, with that being said, at this point, it's exclusive to this program. Social media, are now out there. So the question is, how long will it take for an unidentified aircraft report, encounter, case, or whatever to be reported to be investigated by the Navy? That is up for interpretation. But that is a very, very exciting and encouraging development that did not stay in draft form for 16 years. I was afraid that by reading this and that it was in draft form, they could keep draft form for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. They could do that. They don't need to just implement it because it's in draft today, that tomorrow they have to implement it. It's really in this case. Being reported. I would assume that it's an updated statement and not a corrected statement. Because if it was a mistake, and that message had gone out, let's say, years ago, or 6 months ago, or 6 days ago, it doesn't matter, that they would contact and Politico would retract it and they would issue a correction. To Mr. Brian Bender's credit, and I really, really like seeing this, there was a mistake that was made. You're actually making mistakes all the time, so I'm not trying to pick on him. But he made a mistake on the name of what ATIP stood for. It was brought to his attention. They immediately corrected it very, very quickly. That's what journalism is about. Getting the message out there as accurately as possible. And if you then you make a correction. And so my credit to Mr. Brian Bender for doing that. I'm not picking on him for making that mistake. Again, I make 100 times more than he does, I'm sure. But regardless, it's about being accurate. So my credit to him for doing that. I wish more investigative journalists would follow suit. But they do that as a What I like to do is bring all that evidence to you, and in the end, despite my opinions on things, you decide. Comments there. You can join me on the Black Vault message forum, blackvault.com, or on Facebook. There's a group as well. Even on Twitter, feel free to use hashtag BlackVault. Sound off. Even if you don't agree with me, I'm fine with that. There's quite a few people that don't. But that's okay. I love interesting dialogue, and I appreciate you all listening. Until next time, this is John Greenwald Jr. signing off. We'll see you later.
Here is a big information. Fort Durham, soldiers guard burial leader curse. January 27, 2010. From dot community members created January 20 to honor granted the burial leader curse, which teaches troops the skills, recruit to lead, train, fight, and acclamation commission as Mensa's munition officer. Guest speaker for the ceremony was Command SGT Major Stephen J. Travers, as Battalion 87, 78 Infantry Regiment Command Sergeant Major. During the ceremony, Travers was able for importance of VLC for junior non-commissioned officers. We are the Army at war, Travers said. With today's Army focused on the 10th that admirals are warrior first. The warrior leader curse, or VLC, is a young Zagrans corporal or specialist first opportunity. Sorry, wait. It's very hard. So, specialist for opportunity, for institutional combat leadership training, in a war without a front. The particular leader training is well worth it. It is answers junior NCOs can all perform, and combat leaders, sergeants in charge of the soldiers in Afghanistan, Iraq,
or anywhere your country demands, we get to defend your constitution and your way of life. Face it with real life and that mission. Whether they hunting, immigrants, or coordination, combat logistic patrols will providing their own security. These NCOs are ready to perform their wartime missions. He told the audience that the resting place of Baron Friedrich William von Steuben, a founding father of the Army Discipline Program, as the last 60 miles south of Fort Drum. There's not a signal soldier out there who hasn't heard of the Steuben's regulations for the order and discipline of the troops of the United States, as well as the Blue Book, and what it demands to the fleeing Continental Army, Travers said. It was the Steuben who introduced and perfected drill to Washington, Hungary. Cold and war army at the Wailu Forge in the winter of 1778 in the Blue Book. Von Steuben also established the duties and responsibilities of the army leaders. Back then, the sergeants and the corporals were handpicked for the leadership abilities and commitment to the honest mission, not so far removed from the process we use it today. Good experiences soldiers become sergeants, and they get put in the church of older soldiers. And remember, the example you set every day determines your soldiers' conduct, disciplines, and commitment to these army waivers. Will counting to share the advice of the Steuben. Travers talk about how the Blue Book says to inspect soldiers, making sure they have a proper increment, and that a sergeant needs to know the soldiers. Sergeants, make sure you understand the capabilities of your soldiers, and now the leadership is in the art. Travers said. A true artist understands that each soldier is unequal. Come with his or her own strengths and weakness, and for service. That's Garrett leadership. You can provide it. Finally, Travis engaged the graders and audience to research the Blue Book themselves, and he shared what he said is the bottom line, and the perspective New Garden should have. Today, you are now, they, them, the army. It was they what sent you to this school. I one day will come up in the picking list to begin with. The case you have figured it out. It is they. We make things happen, Travis say. They are the ones who enforce standards, account for their soldiers, and most importantly, take responsibility for their actions. Hopefully you all understand that the soldiers see you in a different light now that you are a leader. And it's your church to act today. Remember years from now as they reflect back on their service. You, the NCO, are they, the soldiers, for them. After sharing his remakes, Ravers helped to recognize the Gordons. SP Scott, Demon Headquarters, and the Headquarters Troop 60 Squadron. Okay. Okay, this is very hard stuff. What? Oh shit. Kaiserslautern scouts rocket to install Achievement. What the fuck? He is... Und Kaiserslautern ist der Airbase Rammstein. And scout rocket installators Achievements. Oh shit. This is crazy stuff.
Today, with pending sanctions and military actions, POTUS will gain more ammunition and intel against them. Suicide watch. The deal kept Iran quiet. The goal was to keep POTUS in until impeachment and his term ended. Bigger than people can imagine, treason is 1/10 of what we're dealing with. God, if treason is 1/10. But what else is there? Preponderance of other crimes. Ask yourself ask yourself why is UK so involved as they help with the spying. Trips to the White House. Are they hiding? What happened is even part of Five Eyes, and that would be insecure. Why is that relevant? Again, because the Five Eyes were involved in the
Very, very hard stuff.
And just a reminder that the number is 1-800-270-8255. That will be relevant. So, Suicide Weekend. Herb Sandler, the banker who financed ProPublica, dies at 47. And Herb Sandler is called a banker and philanthropist. He, with his wife, set up financing for ProPublica, the nonprofit investigative reporting organization that seeks to be an alternative model for system.
I have a new secret information for you. As a new military operation. And this is what we have here, see from, or what we have listening from the suicidal. It's not suicidal from the person. You see to the satanism. This all agencies or Democrats or whatever. It's all satanism. And this suicidal elder speak to the to better speak is this is a ritual weaking. He killing persons for ritualing from where? Right. Weapon. And why he's killing? That's easy. He's satanism.
Copied Herbert Herb Sandler.
And here's the big plan. He was planning to kill, or yes, he's kill the person from a war. This is a big war, not a World War II, not a Cold War. This is a civil war. And this civil war is when you can the movie. You can the movie Purge. Yes, you all can this movie. So and this is to come in real. This is coming to real.
To start
the purge is coming to real.
Either having suicides or having deaths, they're explicit. brother dies. And how did Hillary announce it? She announced it on Twitter. We lost my brother. It's hard to find words. To Megan, father to Zach, Simon, we miss him very much. That was on June 8, 2019. And according to the New York Times, Tony Rodham, Hillary Clinton's youngest brother, who helped the Clintons in their presidential endeavors, but also drew unwelcome controversy, died on Friday. And Mrs. Clinton announced the death via Twitter on Saturday, but no other details were given. Then we have, you guys, so most of this you all know. It's just trying to tie it together here. Officers died by suicide in 2025. The commissioner has a America's largest police force, and I thought it was interesting that this News 4 New York NBC affiliate says missing MIT homicide detective found dead and sheepshead baby from apparent suicide.
What?
Relationship with Indy and it's given is 6419, but you'll see I have an asterisk there because she was unidentifiable. But we haven't really formed the people. So what is the cause of that? Press 1 if you believe the autopsy report of JFK. Press 2 if you don't. DHS, specifically around the children and what happens to children that were in the foster care system. An article that was published about her showing up in a site, and that was actually her appearance on Indy the Daily Show.
Did you happen to see her assistant's appearance on Indy's show?
No, I did not.
She's in a way, shed a lot of light on what the senator was doing, and has also been had some very suspicious activity surrounding her, not from a perspective of her where all of a sudden she lost all comms. She was in the middle of a conversation with Indian, and her phone was completely disabled. Not talking about losing internet. Her phone was completely just shut off.
Well, you know, so there's Q always talks about that you need to pray.
Guys, here's some new information for you. Waiting. Table of contents. Storing a document preparation program to submission, document submission, comment encryption, DSA back check,
deference, submersion, revision, attitude, and construction change documents. Appendix A, nomenclature step of the Bluebeam Studio account. A1, installing Bluebeam. A2, set up Bluebeam Studio account. A3, demo Bluebeam Studio project sessions. That's very interesting. Oh shit! This is the real document. Click. Patriots, this link. Patriots, look this link. It's perfect where you are.
Republic of Georgia, and he and Terry McAuliffe, the former governor or the current governor of Virginia, the man who paid something $1,000 to Andrew McCabe's wife, up in Clinton's house after they left the White House, dirt poor. That Terry McAuliffe, he and Tony Rodham had an electric car company together. So all of the decedents, certainly, I genuinely, if you have any friends or family, enrichment, deepest condolences for your losses. I hope that you find peace, and I hope that you find the answers. I hope that you find the truth. I do sincerely hope that they have a good relationship with the Lord. So we'll continue to keep track of these events, and again, if you all are aware of rather morbid, but you know, the right to know will be ours, and we do have to deal with the truth of the very serious things that we're doing, even if some of the times we get to have patience. So, anyway, just want to go ahead, sir.
I was going to starting the list. Have you considered adding, similar to what Human Players has, concepts? I'm not suggesting, it's just a thought that came to mind because, right, because in some of them, there's always just putting that aside, but it's an aspect that maybe it's the connection more like into the related to the subject and not related to the subject. If you thought of that, I'm not saying you should, I'm just wanted to get that thought of that.
Well, so it's interesting. I had not thought of that, in part because I had not thought of that. The other thing is, I would be a little bit hesitant having absolutely no direct information about these individuals beyond what I can confirm in open source information, what their like soul, you know, like ultimately, you know, what happened or what happened to them physically, but ultimately how they'll shake out in terms of history. So, and, you know, they do say not to, I mean, and it's often said that one shouldn't speak ill of the dead. I think that when John McCain died and when Joe Walker Bush died, I think we should away from reminding people of their history, because I think they're a little too flowery, and too unrealistic. But I don't know any of these people personally, so I respect their families. I probably the connections that we have the access to do it.
That's all. Oh, I go here.
It's both. Man said it properly because I'm trying to think.
Jet ski. Be deep in pool.
Yeah. Okay. My English is very bad. I see what is on the bed. What is the cat? No. What is to the plan? I see to the new world order. I see what is the planning from the new. Very bad. You see, my rap is bad.
I don't know where they find me, man. These people, where you find me? Who's this now? It's box 6 now. No, man, I've had all the iPhones, so I want to change. Oh, please. I want to get off this. My bad, what's your name? I'll probably jump in someone else's car.
No, what did you say for real? No, for real, what you say?
I don't know.
She said she liked you.
It's lovely as well.
Every time. Even if she doesn't send her request, just click on it.
No, most of the people that's complaining, that's it. You know, like that.
Yeah, what up? Yeah, I'm here. You will like German rap for me? Okay. Oh shit.
How long have you been out? Are you alright? Fuck's sake. Get off my new one. Is Law still in the fab? No, I'm gonna go and chill.
Yeah.
Okay, fuck off, Luke.
Yeah. wie viele Menschen heutzutage das System nicht hinterfragen. Jetzt soll ich noch davor warnen, was sie gerade im Hintergrund planen. Was soll ich bitte Operation Blue Baby auch Operation Blue Book verraten? Eine Fake-Alien-Invasion wollen sie starten. Doch sie wollen die Menschen weiterhin dumm halten. Niemand darf was hinterfragen. Niemand darf was in die Öffentlichkeit fragen. Ich soll dir was über diese komplette Massenmanipulation verraten. Ich soll dir was über das Haarprogramm wie auch die Chemtrails sagen. Siehst du nicht, dass du gerade eher ich hasse meinen Sprachfehler. Yeah. It's a chiller beat. I smoke not weed. I see to the brain. What is to the EQ from the mans and the women? I see what is to the society. He's going see to the TV. What is to the mass manipulation to you on the media? I see to the internet. He's looking. My English is very bad.
Technically an employee of the United States Department of Justice.
Offen. Digi, los. Wo bist du Depp? Pitchcock, Michael! 18 Uhr irgendwas müssen wir los, gell? Das war pünktlich um 19.000, dann können wir mal fett zocken. Lasertag. Yeah! Yeah. Was denn alle die Tuna? Auf das Hamann! Weißt du, was er meint?
Wann gehen wir?
Hast du mir irgendwas?
Aber nicht! Ich hab Hunger, aber voll.
Ja, ich auch. Komm, wir zocken noch eine Runde, dann gehen wir. Essen machen.
David, was machst du? Sachen packen schon mal. Pack schon Bier mit ein. Wie jetzt? Mutter und so?
Wie lange geht sowas?
Was? Nein, das geht sogar länger.
Für 10 Euro.
Für 10 Euro.
Aber nur sonntags. Und David, rufst du mich dann an? David. David, rufst du mich dann an? Ciao, ciao. Jetzt geht's gleich nach Hagsfeld. Und dann tun wir erstmal Fett Lasertag zocken. Was hat er gemacht? Später, Digi.
Macht doch dein